much though.
It's a sad deal.
You try this one.
It's a sad deal. Oh. Please. Parkinson's.
Oh, I was thinking that less longer.
Here's my text. It sends me a text.
So I pull it up first and then I share.
Work too, so
So you're getting kept outside.
just in case.
Fun.
It's a bad thing.
Do you feel like you're understanding the budget? Or are you?
More than the one meeting that I attended to last year.
Why not? I have not heard from him. I don't know if it's
Oh, there it was.
Might have been something like that.
He has architects.
Yeah, so it is right.
Council in general, budget, knowing what
And
budget's
it's-
passed.
It's one of these,
Yeah.
the medicine is pretty good for about the first 8, 9 years.
Budget. See all these millions.
It's
So
really
much of it
runs effectively.
those buckets are dedicated to sound, dedicated to all the things we have to do to provide service. So this is
Then-
a lot of.
Yeah, there's
That.
bad.
Just down to Zoom.
He was like, sure, it'd be nice to.
And then
do
there.
that. You know what I mean? So that's the problem.
Vietnam
A lot of it-
Agent Orange and then
So,
Wow, look at that.
this should help.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And open it,
All that
ask as many questions. I
Okay.
mean, really, this is why we.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay, we ready to roll?
hereditary, like thinking it's
This is on the roll.
kind of related to pension.
He's online.
He's on.
Yeah.
You hear us, Mark? Oh, you can. I better be quiet.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep. I'm just gonna say something.
Not everyone's here.
He's online. No worries. All right, I snuck in. Okay, I'm going to call to order our special city council budget workshop meeting for October 10th. I'm immediately just going to kick this over to Cindy to kick us off. And please, I want this to be just open dialogue. Ask as many questions as you need to understand the budget. There's a lot of moving parts in our budget.
There is a lot of moving parts. So I'm just going to kind of go over the basic kind of how it goes. Where we kind of got to where we are and then what our next steps are. And then I thought we would go over, if it pleases everyone, all the little summary, kind of go over some of the worksheets that you have been distributed on OneNote. And then we can answer any question. Department heads are here. They're happy to answer any questions you have. So if we start here. There, see, it's like a Scrabble game, trying to get our budget. That's my attempt at being creative.
8 points.
The whole thing about budgeting is you have to remember if we're budgeting governmental or enterprise funds. They're budgeted very differently and they can't really cross. Their revenues can't cross with each other. So when you think about governmental, it's everything that's not our utilities, basically. So everything that's housed in the general fund. So basically you're looking at finance and administration and police and fire and court, planning, building, parks and recreation, streets. Those are all governmental operations. Those are over on this side of the world. On the other side, light, water, sewer, garbage.
And then if I can just pop in,
Absolutely.
think of the enterprise funds as individual business entities, right? So you can't light department money can't go over to public works.
That's very correct. In fact, each one of these funds that we go through throughout the budgeting, everybody has their own balance sheet. Everybody has their own income statement. And so everything's very separate. There's all these funds that we have, but they're kind of grouped into these labels of governmental and enterprise. But yes, the mayor's exactly right. And really the enterprise funds, they're classified in financial statements as business type.
Mhm.
And that's exactly why, because they're little businesses is what they are. So we go into, what our primary revenue sources are. On the governmental side of the world, it's taxes, it's fees, it's charges for services, it's penalties that the court brings in, it's park and recreation fees, it's aquatic fees, some grants that we get, everything that's governmental in that way. Whoops. Yeah. All right. Sorry. I'm back there. Enterprise funds. They have rates. That's their main revenue source, is the rates that you as a body set. They do have some charges for fees and some other miscellaneous, some rents and some things in there, but the majority of what runs the enterprise funds are the rates that they receive from the ratepayers. Hold on, I'm going to go back up here. I missed a slide. That one, the uses of governmental revenues. And I just went over all of the different departments that use those. Everybody I just talked about. What I didn't point out was our capital project, our aquatic center. That is governmental as well. So then we talked about our enterprise revenues. The uses of those are the utilities themselves. So here's the basic slide of budgeting, governmental versus enterprise. Governmental can go to anywhere. It stays in the general fund. It goes to other, they're called special revenue funds, but you can push them over to there. You can actually push them out to enterprise funds if you want to. If you had a lot of money, some cities might do that. We've never been in that position necessarily to have that luxury, but it does mean that enterprise fund revenues cannot go back to anybody else. You cannot use excess light department cash to fund a garbage truck or to buy a police car or to hire a fireman. You can't use money from those enterprise funds to do anything governmentally. They have to stay very separate.
And again, Cindy, if I can just hop in.
Please.
If you think about it, when you pay for like your water bill, right? You're paying for water. People, that's your bill for water. If you take that money and move it into power, that takes away from the rate that is set for water.
And the rate payers are different for some of our utilities. Our electrical rate payers are a different group of people than our water rate payers are, or perhaps our sewer or garbage. Those rate payers pay for that exact service. That's a very valid point. Thank you, Mayor. As we go through and we start to budget, one of the first things we do is start to look at revenues. And one of the first revenues I look at is our general fund revenues. So I get our first assessed valuation estimate from the county in about June. So we got that. And then I got another one in September. And this assessed valuation right now anyway is at about $6 million less than last year. That's kind of surprising. I got on the phone. Why is that? Why is our assessed valuation going down? And it was some reassessment of some of our commercial buildings is what it was. I said, does this have to do with our huge 36% increase we had 2 years ago? Is this some right sizing of that? And he goes, that could be. He goes, but it has to do with specifically with your commercial world. So that was his answer. So it popped down. It's the first time our assessed valuation has decreased in, I can't even tell you all. I mean, I was working on our revenue slides for next council meeting, and that's a 10-year, and it certainly hasn't happened in that 10 years. I'd have to go back some time to find when it decreased since. So you can just kind of see how it has flown up there and how it is kind of maintaining for 2025. Our property tax levies are interesting in that, so remember we had the first, the big green here is the general fund. The levy lift is the dark green that kind of pops in there. And so remember in 2021, we did not levy the levy lift. That's when the state came in and said they didn't like the way that was worded and said that we would not be able to do that anymore. We then had to pay some of that money back the next year, which is the dip in that general fund levy. That's why it dips there. And then we had the new levy lift. So that's now in place. We are allowed by state law to take a 1% increase over our last levy. And then plus new constructions on top of that. On our regular levy, our levy lift is allowed a 6%. When that was voted on, that has a 6% rise. So those rise at different rates. So they also have a different base. So when I give our assessed valuation, I'm giving basically our average, because the levy lift and the EMS levy actually are a little bit of a lower base because low income senior citizens are allowed to remove themselves from that if they go through some hoops. So that's what's happening with the levy lift and the general. And then you can see the red, that's our general obligation bond. So for 2024, the estimate that came from our bond underwriter was $635,000. as it was. You all know we got our AA or, our AA plus rating, which allowed us to have a lower interest rate in the market, which saved us a bunch of money long-term for the citizens of this community. So for this next year, it's considerably lower. It's like $550,000 or something for the levy for next year, which will be a tax savings to our citizens to do that. So every year we'll look at what that requirement for our principal and interest payment is for the year. And that's how we'll then approach that with the levy. And then that's just that's divided by the assessed valuation. And that's how much that goes in as a dollar amount. We just kind of provide that to the county. But that's kind of what the property tax levies look like. And those are the main things, and this and the sales and utility taxes. And the thing I want to point out here is, it's fairly common. It's pretty standard, except for that red one on top. And that red one on top, I've been talking about a little bit, and it's our brokered natural gas tax. And that's the tax that actually Eastern pays on their natural gas. So that was floating along pretty nicely over the years. And right now it's very low because they must have gotten one heck of a contract on the open market. And that just means our piece of that is much lower. So that has impacted not only the general fund, but that's impacted the residential street fund, and it's impacted Parks and Recreation. So, between that, our sales taxes are a little bit lower. That brokered natural gas tax is a little bit lower. So, there were some revenue challenges going into this year that we haven't had in the past few years. So those taxes they pay for all the stuff. They pay for everything from, and I don't need to read it all for you. You guys certainly can do that. But it pays for everything that's governmental. What's interesting about though, is that you look at these that are highlighted in green here, those are all pure general fund departments. That means they are absolutely they are funded by pure governmental funds. Police, fire, city clerk, municipal court, code enforcement, left, transfers, and our debt. So that's all funded by all these governmental revenues. The rest of these that are highlighted here in blue, administration, city council, finance, and legal, we have a piece of us that we bill back to the enterprise funds. I bill them for doing their payroll. I bill them for doing their accounts payable. We bill them for Mark's time, the mayor's time. We bill them for your time. And so that's the only way we can get money from an enterprise fund, from a utility, into the general fund for governmental operations is by earning it. And that is audited every year. So that's complex little formula and paperwork. So when the auditors come in, they look at what that is, what we say that is, they look at how we calculate it. It's a pretty big revenue source for the general fund. This year for the finance and executive charges, it's like $1.4 million that pays for all of that. So that's what's happening there. Budget process. So the first thing we do is we establish our revenues. In July, we budget using our labor contracts, what we believe our wages and benefits are going to be. Some of that stuff doesn't come out till a little bit later, but we have a pretty good estimate on that. I give all the governmental people a base budget, which is basically the same base budget every year. Okay, here's your budget. Go make this work. And then they can put in a discretionary request for something else. Typically, if it's an ongoing discretionary request, we mostly see those with police and fire. And if they bring something forward, yeah, but I'm having this huge expense and it's going to be ongoing, I'd like to consider that to be ongoing. That then goes and is included in their base budget for the next year. If it's a one-time expense, it's not. I whip that out when I give them their dollar amount for the next year. That's governmental. Enterprise funds, well, they have rates and they know what their rates are going to be. And their operations and it needs to be handled by their rates. It just does. So that means all their capital that they're going to do. That means all their operations. It means funding their depreciation, all of that. They also then put in a discretionary request for something that's outside of that. If it's a new program they want to do, if it's a big piece of equipment, if it's something that isn't just going to slide into their normal budget, if it's going to require a significant difference from their last year's budget, then you're going to see that as a discretionary request as well. Or if it's going to mean we cannot fund our depreciation in total, or if it's going to mean something interesting in that way. So, most people just do one or the other. I mean, Todd has the luxury of he gets to do both governmental and enterprise fund budgeting. But outside of that, most of us fall on the governmental side. So everybody does their budgets, they turn them in, I process it all, I put it together in spreadsheets, it goes out to Mark and the mayor, and they sit down and they spend some time reviewing that. And they have very detailed spreadsheets that they look at. They then call all the department heads in one by one, and they go over everything that's in there. They ask questions about why is this year's this way and you're not budgeting for that. And they ask very specific questions. They go through all that. They look at all their discretionary requests. At the end of all that, they have a powwow, and then they decide what they think is here and there. We look at what the revenues are going to be and what we're going to be able to fund. And then I go to work and I try to get the thing balanced. After it's balanced, it goes back to them for their final review. And then it sits there, and now it sits for you on review. So what you have in front of you on your OneNotes is a balanced budget from the mayor. It's called the mayor's budget. We are presented with a balanced budget. When I say balanced, I mean every fund is balanced. Revenues equal expenditures. We look at what we think the cash coming in is going to be, and is there going to be any leftover cash to put towards programs for this year, and how much do we need to carry over into the next year? It's kind of a 3-year process as we look into that. So, but that's what you have in front of you is a balanced budget. The departments will be set to start making presentations starting next council meeting. The first thing next council meeting we'll talk about is our tax levies and where those are at right now. We'll look at where our general fund and all of our governmental revenues are right now. And then you'll hear from police and fire starting next time. So as we make our way through this budget process, then we'll get to December, and we need to have this budget in place and approved the first meeting in December, because it has to be in place by January 1st. It is a 5-day budget. That means it's effective 5 days after passage and publication. So if you pass that on December, the 10th or so, it's not that Thursday it's published, it's the next Thursday, and then it's effective 5 days after that. So it has to be in place by January 1. That's pretty much what the process is. So I realize that was a lot. Happy to answer any questions about any of that. And I thank you, Mayor, for kind of adding to that. But I thought, unless you have specific questions right now, what we might do is I talked a little bit at council about those summary sheets. And I thought I might go through the OneNote and just kind of show you the narrative that's out there, the detail, if you're interested in the detail, and then the summary sheet piece so that you know what you're looking at when you review it. And then, of course, if you want to ask any questions on any specific department, we certainly can gather and do that as well. But let me pull that up really quick here. And I did put your budgeting 101 on your OneNote sheet, so I'll show you that here in a sec. I don't know, Mark, I'm looking. Here I come. I'm there, I think. Oh, share. Sorry, my bad. So I did put it up here on it's right down there at the very bottom. So the presentation we just made is there if you wanted to review that. So on your 2025 budget, your city council, you have over at the top, this main page is just basic information that's, about different things. We can actually refer to some of that easily tonight. The piece I want to show you right now is this. I got to move this guy so I can get out of here. Okay. So if I'm going to talk just about the general fund for a minute. So back. Oh, okay. Well, maybe not.
So just a note that the revenues, other than rates, because we know what the rates are, but property taxes, sales taxes, that kind of well, we know property taxes, sales taxes. It's an educated guess on our revenues because we don't know exactly the sales tax revenue that we are going to receive. We get a pretty good idea, but that can change because we don't get it every month. Once a year, it's quarterly.
I'm getting there a different way. Hold on. So this is the okay. I'm getting there. Excuse me.
I got, do you get it?
Yes. Can you believe it? All right. So this is the,
Hey Cindy, is there any way to
I can make it,
make that big?
I'll sure
It's
try.
very difficult to see from here. I guess I could have just brought my laptop. Logged into.
I'm going, I just have to move everything out of the way here.
Are you guys?
So,
You guys are able to log in? Okay. If not, no worries. Like
I think I
I've
can.
seen that about 1,000 times.
I just didn't know how to make that bigger on this screen.
Oh, no worries.
That I don't know how to do. Is this, can you guys all see this? I mean, it's just, is what it, can you see this? Do you want it bigger? I can go
I
bigger.
can't- I mean, maybe it's just me and old eyes. But
It's not. Mine comes up.
I know from memory what this is, but
Is that better?
because I've seen that.
Yes, I can
Okay.
see,
Yes, it
I can
is.
see that from here.
Okay, so what we're looking at
Thank you.
here. Try the thumbnail. I'm trying to get rid of all these people up here so I don't have to look at this podium. So I'll go up there. So this is the 2025 preliminary budget. It is I grabbed this off of so I keep this over time. And as I'm updating these budget spreadsheets for these departments, anything that's general fund pops into this so I can see kind of where we're at. And once I can get down to that, I see what our budget is. I can plug in what the revenues I've budgeted are. In doing that, I take a look at what I think are this would be easier if I was just swiping it up there. There. Okay. So this is what I think our ending cash is going to be. I might be a little hopeful for that. I'll be really honest. That might be hopeful. I take out our 25% operating reserve. That is in our financial policy that you, as a body, agreed to that we would maintain. I take out this, what did I call this? This is our revenue stabilization, this 464, and I come up with $710 that would go towards our current year's programming. So in going back, it adds that back in, and I come up and I have $24,000 left over. That being said, I think my 3.5 is probably generous on my part. Just kind of how cash is going right now, comparing it to previous years. But I'm going to leave it there just because I did like the way sales tax went this month. And if that continues, and if we have a little bit of a trend there, we could probably make that. Within this budget and within all the departments, as you go that are housed in the general fund, there's not any specific discretionary requests that are funded there. There's just a couple very small from the police department, but we kind of utilized some money they weren't using and just repurposed it for them. So it didn't really make a difference. So we have our operating reserve. We have the mayor's contingency fund. We have an emergency overtime fund. That emergency overtime kind of helps at the end of the year when you have your budget supposed to be this. And if your actual dollars are coming in larger because we've had this extended overtime, these little contingency funds of the mayor's, if they haven't been used, help keep our budget in check. It is against state law to close the year with a budget that's over its approved balance. It's approved budget. It does have the revenue stabilization. That's all it has in there. I do have that opioid money sitting in there. There's 178.3 that we received so far. The reason it's sitting up there in the budget world is so that if something came along that there was a request to use opioid money and that was approved by Mark or went to the council that Jack, that you sit on, that would easily then be able to pop out and go to police, fire, or court. That's probably who it's going to go to. I mean, is that, and those are on the general fund anyway, but that way it's not just in their budget to be spent on anything. It stays there until it's approved and then I can just pop it in there. So it's actually in that budget, but I actually then removed it down here too, so that it is a part of that $24,000 that's left over. We don't pay our 25%. I don't calculate the contingency on the let me see, there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't do it on, but I don't do it on the Public Works Administration. That is funded by a like revenue. So Todd has a Public Work Administration account in the general fund that houses personnel and a small amount of operating. And then what he does with that is what runs the street and the water and the garbage and the sewer. And so that meant those pay into that Public Works Administration. So if it's $635,000 in his Public Works admin account, we bring in $635,000 from those utilities. So it's a net zero. So I take that out. It's not there. I take out my 1.4 million that we're budgeting for the finance and executive charges. We don't calculate the 25% on any of those contingency funds. That doesn't, no, if there's any capital in there, which there's not, but we wouldn't do the 25% on that. The 25% is so if the wheels were to fall off this bus, we have 3 months worth of expenses to get things on the track again. That's what the 25% is for. So you think about that just really operationally. It's just operational stuff. So you take out all the rest of that. But that's how I come up with what we're doing in the general fund. So once I can get this part to balance, I know that I can get the general fund's good to go. That then kind of feeds back down to the departments that are general fund people. In doing this year, I did a lot of, specifically with the police and fire both did some of this. We moved some of their stuff from the general fund into some other operational accounts. In the fire department, we moved money from the general fund into the EMS levy. That was just reapproved by the voters for 6 years. This is year 1 of 6. Moved all their EMS costs into there. We moved some stuff in the police department. We moved the 2 people that are there, police specialists, I think they're called, over into our criminal justice fund. We can do that. That's totally legal. That is a new criminal justice program, and therefore that is eligible to be paid for out of criminal justice dollars. So trying to move things where else they could be paid for legally, because when I first started this, we were $600,000 out in the general fund. I don't know how this is going to work. We don't have enough money, and just trying to move things here and there and manage that. And that's kind of how that budgeting session goes, is that you just have to kind of manage that through and try to get the general fund down to where we can balance it and maintain our reserves as the financial policy says we will. So that's the general fund. Then back to everybody else. I'm going to pop over here.
Cindy, can I ask a quick question?
Can.
The 2025 revenue budget,
Yeah.
is that governmental and enterprise together?
No, the one you're looking at right here, this is just the general fund of the governmental. This is just the general fund pieces of sales tax, the general fund, the building permits, the court fees, sales tax, property tax, interest, probation fees, things like that. That's what this revenue piece is. The general fund has so many working parts to it because it has so many different departments that are represented that it really is probably the most difficult to balance, because you're trying to maintain our current programs, and you are trying then to see if you have any extra money that you can give to the mayor, Mark, and council to see if they can fund additional programs. That's really where most of those are going to come from. If there's a new program that wants to come from the light department, that's going to come from the light department revenue base. So this is really where the meat of this comes from. All the other governmental revenues are in things like, parks and recreation, criminal justice that I spoke of, information technology. There's equipment reserves in street and fire and park. So all those little funds out there that have these dedicated little pots of money that stay with them. So if I'll use parks, I'll use the park capital fund. So the council decided to send $350,000 and swoop that over to help build our aquatic center. So that left them with a much smaller amount of money. So they have this money that's sitting there and there's nothing budgeted for it for this year. But that means it will just grow. It'll get its own interest. It stays in its own little pot and it will just continue to grow until there's a use for it, until there's a budgeted and legally approved use for it. That happens in all of those. That happens in the fire equipment reserve. It happens in the street department. Todd, that's where residential street lives, is in its own little bucket. So the 4% that comes in on utility tax that goes into residential street, that just lives there. And if Todd doesn't spend it all, it goes into the next year to be used on the next year's programs. So that separates it from the general fund, because if it was in the general fund, it would go back into the big mixing bowl and then get reallocated the next year to who knows who. But having it in those separate little pots keeps it very, just separate for those departments so that they can use that whenever that's needed for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so just clarification for me. So when I go over and look at like the light fund budget, that really cool summary page you did, and you have a rate revenue and late fees line, that's enterprise revenue, not governmental. Is that correct?
Yes. And it's specifically light department revenue. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that's how we can see all the enterprise income and expenses are on those summary pages.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Let me unshare this and then I'll get to what he's talking about right there.
Those summary pages are great, by the way.
Good. Glad you like them.
Yeah, those are really good.
Okay. And I got to make this bigger and I have to share this. I don't know, Mark, I think you can teach an old dog a new trick. Maybe I figured this out finally. Okay. So who's up here first? It looks like I pulled street up first. So what we're talking about here, this is street. This is Fund 101. It's its own little fund. It is the operational fund for the street department. So they have revenues they bring in. Their biggest revenues are going to be the gas taxes from the state. Those go directly into our street fund. Now, our gas taxes are not calculated based on the price of gas. They are calculated based on the gallons. So as gas prices go up, that doesn't really change our gas taxes at all. And we really saw decreases in our gas tax during COVID because people weren't going anywhere. They were staying home. And, we are seeing some decreases. I'm guessing it's from electric cars. And so, gas taxes haven't been going up like they used to in old years, but I mean, it's still very reasonable. So this has, when I say his street funds, this is his street, since it also has utility taxes. This is his street. It is his arterial street. It is his residential street. And then he has two tiny little funds, bicycle safety and an equipment reserve. So this transfer in from other funds, that's the general fund contribution to the street fund. Used to be much lower than that. And it was very consistent for a long time. Well, operational costs go up in the street department. And that's when the street department was really struggling to keep its head above water. So we ended up increasing that. We were able to reestablish and now maintain the street department's 25% reserve, which is great. So that 350, it was kind of on the table. I brought it up. We want to cut this because we need money. And that was a big fat no. We're not going to do that. We need to keep the streets, intact. That capital grant, that's a huge street project that Todd has planned for next year. And then the utility taxes are the taxes I spoke of on your utility bill, your residential street taxes. So, you know, they are what they are. He has a little more going out this year than he has coming in. And that's okay because he has some money that he didn't spend this year in his residential street fund that we're going to bring into next year since it stays over there in that little bucket and we can use it to pay for 2025. So the street fund looks like it's healthy and worthwhile. On the bottom of this one, on any of these that have cash that are associated with them, I have the first two pieces, the first two paragraphs here are the stuff that's coming in from 2024 into 2025. So I show what's restricted, which means we can't spend it, and what's available. And then at the end of that, what's going to go out is that 25% reserve and any other restricted reserve we have, and then unrestricted, what the cash carryover that could be used. I would hesitate to have us spend every dime of cash carryover because it is good to have some money to bring into the next year. There is cash flow that has to happen. There is payroll. There is stuff that goes on in January before revenue starts kicking in. And so we do need to have in all the funds some kind of cash flow, those that have personnel to help fund those payroll costs. But so that's on the bottom of those summary sheets. I'm kind of going little by little here. Sorry. On the right, I tried to give you some expenses by year, if they went up or down. Now that these are kind of out there just because it all has to do with arterial streets. And if he has huge street projects going on one year, those are going to have some big swings, those percentages. So take those as you will. And then it does show if there's any discretionaries there. So yes, there was the $300,000 was for a street sweeper. The $15,000 was for a de-icer. Mm-hmm. And the $19,000 here is right now being recommended for funding from the mayor. It's a new mower for some of our green space in the city. So that's the streets. And I have some comparisons. So they're all going to look the same way. And we just went down through all those. And then if you go up to the top, I just gave you some historicals for the last few years because sometimes that's worthwhile to see. And so that's kind of what they all look like. We can go through other departments if you wish. If you've already reviewed them and have questions, we can pull those up and pull a department up. I'm here to kind of do what you would like at this point.
I have a question.
Okay.
And if you could just elaborate on this more, because I know like a lot of cities run with like a 10%, 15% reserve, and we're at 25. And you said like if the wheels fall off, so like, do you elaborate on like why we have such a big difference from a lot of other cities?
So, governmental accounting standards does anywhere from 10 to like 35. And when they talk about it, and then their literature, you have to look at your revenue generating ability. And our revenue generating ability is not as much as Spokane. We don't have toys. We don't have cars. We don't have things that bring in big pieces of sales tax. Our sales tax is very dependent on our building, the building industry in Cheney. So when someone's building their home, we get, sales tax off that. Specifically, we get good sales tax off Eastern projects because those are huge buildings and they're multi-year buildings. But that's one of the reasons we're kind of at this level right now is there's not a big, huge project going on in town. And we don't have the ability so the good thing about that is, so here's our sales tax. So we don't have any toys. So in really good years, when everybody goes out and gets a new car and re-roofs their house and does all this stuff, we don't get the cars, we don't get the boats, we don't get the motorhomes. So we don't get these huge big pieces up here. That also means we don't get those huge dips when inflation happens. We haven't seen as big of a decrease. I mean, ours is now sitting right now, I think it was a little under 5% is where our decrease is for the year right now. There are places that it's significantly worse than that. Mark just got something from the state that's talking about statewide, the decrease in sales tax. So our property tax, we pretty much know what that's going to be as long as people pay them. But between property tax and sales tax and utility taxes, those are our three main, and there's no way to really bump that up If all of a sudden it hits and if we spend a lot of that, it's hard to get that back. When we had our last bout of inflation some years ago, and we dipped into, it's before we had a financial policy, and we dipped into our reserves, and we got down to, as low as like 15%, to the point that there were some funds that were going to struggle to make payroll, because our reserve is also our cash flow buffer. So we don't separate those two. It's one. I just have one piece of reserve that operates not only as my operating reserve, but it's also my cash flow, because your revenues don't come in a straight line and your expenditures aren't a straight line. And so as I have more expenditures, I have enough money to dip in and still pay those bills. So by instead of having two separate funds for that, cash flow and an operating, by having one that's a little bit bigger and having 25% is, I think, good a financial decision for the city. But two, it helps us to avoid having to put more money aside over here for that cash flow piece. And I will say that the feedback we got from Standard & Poor's when we got our bond rating is they were thrilled about our 25%. They were thrilled by that. They thought that was awesome. So that was one of the reasons we were able to get the rating we got.
When somebody asks me that question, I say, we don't have a Costco in Cheney, right? That would be huge, or
Yeah.
or a Walmart,
Or a
Home
Walmart.
Depot, or something.
Or John Deere,
Or,
like
yeah.
Mhm.
So we don't have that big industry.
We just don't have that.
Because that's a lot of sales tax come to the city via those big.
Yeah,
boxes.
our businesses as a whole don't reach our top how many. They just don't. I mean, they're good businesses and they're great and fine, and they're busy when you walk in there. They're just not our top sales tax
For the
contributors.
longest time, the bookstore
Hmm.
was the largest sales tax contributor to the city of Cheney. But of course, then books went electronic. So just FYI.
Oh,
It
at
puts it in
EW?
perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big one for a long time.
Sandy, could you do me a favor? Just a minute. Do you have the 2025 projection for the base property tax revenue? What is that? Offhand?
Actually.
Yeah, mine are easy.
And so a lot of us lived through the 07, 08
So
recession.
if you got the sales tax, well, those two figures.
Well, so this year I budgeted for 2024, it's just flat 2 million.
Is that some
Get a better
sales
job.
That's for sales tax.
Getting a bachelor's
And for
and master's
2025, I added $25,000 to that.
Well, what's-
Even though we're a little depleted.
We'll use 2024.
That's fine.
What do we have budgeted for base property?
So let me get here.
Well, you just asked about projected sales tax.
All right,
Proper-
regular property tax.
Okay.
So without the levy lift or with the,
It's very big.
just regular, without the levy lift is going to be $2,120,000.
That was for,
That's for 2025.
Just
and then 2025 on sales was 2,025,000.
Correct.
Then our population right now is 13, what?
What did I say? It's on that one note. It's
Or-
13,
or something.
something like that.
13,400.
Just down from 13,600.
Mhm.
Cindy, are you, if you're looking at a document, could you share that? I'm not finding it in OneNote either.
I actually just have the document in my hand.
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't set out to council yet because this is my work for the property tax presentation next council meeting. I just happened to bring it. So
Okay, I'm also not seeing that street fund one that you just looked at. Is it under a certain tab?
so you're on OneNote.
Proper-
So yeah, so go under Public Works.
I don't have a Public Works tab.
Okay, just a minute. I'm getting there. You should have it's across the top. It's probably, you have to click the little down caret and it's going to be down there. So where all the other departments are, there should be.
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I see it. Thank you. So what Paul just asked, you're in the future, you're gonna have like a revenue spreadsheet for us? For
I do.
general?
And I actually believe I have it over in OneNote right now. I'll pull it up here, but over there on your OneNote, if you look under general fund, Under, if you look at the main page, so look under the main page, and under that, it says general fund. There's a revenue there. It says 001 revenues. And I'll pull that up for them to look at here. Hold on.
The reason those two numbers, and just to add some context. About, it was 20 some years ago, I did an exercise where you can go on now, especially the auditor and the Department of Revenue, they have numbers from all cities in the state of Washington. And when you take our base property tax and sales tax, and then I just divide that by our population, we're at, it's $309.32 per person is what we're getting for revenue to provide, you know, some of our basic governmental services, police, fire, some parks, some streets. Now, when I went and then I did the same and I grabbed those numbers from other cities, we were in the bottom 25% compared to all other cities in the state of Washington. In a lot of cases, we were in the bottom 15%. Now, Chief Jenkins, he's going to come someday and want that brand new ladder truck. By the time we save enough money, it's going to probably be $2 million. And the issue is not all cities are created the same with regard to the ability to have revenue, but we're all required to pay for the same patrol cars, cost the same in Cheney as they do in Spokane. Fire trucks cost the same in Cheney as they do in Seattle. And that's why we end up with having to add the levy. We'll get a levy lift by state law. We're allowed to lift it a maximum of 6% for 6 years in order to cover extra costs. That's why we do an EMS levy. A lot of cities don't have to do that. And I can speak from experience. I've had the privilege of working for 4 different cities, and I was involved in all their budgeting. And Mayor's right. Clarkson was where I first started. If you've ever been there, small. It's never going to grow because the county around it is there's no place for them to grow. But and they were poor, but lo and behold comes Costco and Walmart, and they love it there because Idaho comes over because there's no tax on food. And that boosted them through the ceiling. City of Chelan, I work there. They have a population of 5,000, and their property tax is more than double ours, and their sales tax is, they got a Walmart, but the property tax is huge. And secondly, after the big fire in 2015, the one large packing plant almost burned down. And they only belonged to they didn't have any fire hydrants, mind you. And when I left, I negotiated they were going to annex in, huge bump in property tax. Per capita, the richest city in Washington back then was the city of Kansas, a little city in Southwest. They got a huge business park. And I knew the administrator there quite well, and they hit major fights at budget time on how to spend all the dang money. So the interesting thing is, but because of that, and I've mentioned it before, where through necessity, I still claim that the city of Cheney is probably the most efficient and effective local government on its use of the limited funds we have. And what we get, I can tell from experience, the larger you are and the more money you have, the more waste there is. And we have to be so strategic in how we do that because we just don't have anything to spare. And we're all beholden to the economy for a large part of it. But in your spare time, it's interesting. I don't know if we ever got the books from AWC on Welcome to City Hall. They have kind of a basic, it's a pretty big three ring binder, or used to be. But we're a city of Cheney, like so many other cities in Washington, we're a non-charter code city. What that means is City of Spokane is a charter city. They're large enough, they get to create some of their own rules. We are all ruled by the state of Washington. We only get to do what the state allows us to do. If it's not provided in RCWs, we don't get to do it. Spokane, they have a little more leeway. Spokane, Seattle, Tacoma, they're all charter cities. And so we are a code city. So then we follow RCWs, and we're a strong mayor form of government. So RCW 35A 100 shows you what all the powers of a strong mayor. RCW 3511 is for council. And you go into the RCWs, we follow all that, and we have our own code. But the budgeting process it's something we create our own. Cindy does it each and every year so we get by with providing the same levels of service. And we are a full service city. Chelan didn't have fire or police. They got the contract. Now that doesn't mean that's anything better. You don't have near the control, but it's all based on property tax, simply property tax. You just contract with the county to do those or the fire district. I'm not suggesting anything like that. I prefer what we have, but there's so many different ways. But simply put, it's an allocation plan. It's an allocation process. We have to do it every year because that's what our code says. You can do it every 2 years if you want to change the code, but either 1 or 2 years, you got to reallocate. You don't get to just carry things over and keep doing it. You got to stop, reallocate it all. So all the categories, all that, those are our creations based on our practices here. But we know what we have for law enforcement, we have for fire and life safety. Some cities, an interesting one in city of Oak Harbor I worked in, they have a huge park budget. They have no swimming pool, no swimming facilities, and no rec programs. No rec programs whatsoever. But they have huge parks. A lot of money goes into the parks. They have a YMCA that provides an indoor pool. Clarkson had a beautiful little pool like we're going to build, and they didn't take care of it. And they went in with the county and they built an indoor one, and they are struggling. I think you're going to hear some of that from another neighboring city on how expensive indoor pools are. So it's just really, we do a really good job. I just have to brag about Cheney and the history, at least that have seen, where our citizens, and this is our audience for almost every city council meeting, okay? That is not like that in other places. I can guarantee you. Other city I work for, council meetings were generally 4 hours. An hour was public comment. And to me, it's an indicator that we're doing pretty darn good. But it's our own creation. We get 4,145,000 is just general base revenue. And of the sales tax, the state gets 6%. But we get, it's 8.9 when you go and shop here in Cheney. We get 1%, but there's a little fine print in the law that we have that 1%, we got to give 15% of that to the county just for keeping our damn books. And that's a lot of money they get for keeping the books, but you're never going to change that. So we only get 0.85% of that 8.9. The SDA, we're at Teresa, we at 0.9.
Yes.
So they get more sales tax than we do here in Cheney. they get that countywide. Well, the Spokane is the.
Metropolitan area, or the,
P-
they're the boundary, but
PTDA.
it's the metropolitan.
And then you have, county gets a portion. We also have criminal justice, 0.1% that's up, on the ballot this year, or the part of that. So when you really look at it, if, and the mayor hit on it, if we were to have one large manufacturer, whatever, that's where you get a big boost. And there's an old study, I think I mentioned before, where a single family resident on your property tax, what they provide for every dollar they provide in property tax, it's approximately $1.17 to provide services. It's a negative. Now, if you take, well, it used to be Allpack, they've gone, but Haycon, for every dollar they get, it costs us, this was a study years ago, it's 29 cents. So we really want to have a balance of commercial, industrial with residential. Now, I don't know what the stats are on multifamily. I think they're better than a single family. But single family, they're nice as far as community, but for providing revenue for services, they're a negative. So it's great in context, but again, we've added 4% on electrical. It's literally a B&O tax on our electric. Any electrical company that comes into Cheney would have to pay it. But that goes, and it's then rededicated to the parks.
4.75.
Well, the one street and one's parks.
Four
Parks is
4%. Yeah, 4% for the street and 4.75 for parks.
And not too many have done that. We also have the ability on our water, sewer, and garbage. We talked a little bit about that in Public Works this morning. There is no limit. If we wanted to, City of Spokane right now is 19%, 20% on, they charge a B&O tax on water, sewer, and garbage utilities. That goes right into general fund. I don't think it's dedicated. We've done the same with electrical because the state law says you can only charge up to 6%. Anything after that has to be voter approved. And we got voter approval for both of those, and they're here forever as far as the parks and the street residential.
Those are dedicated funds.
Right. So it's a general
Very
B&O tax, but then our ordinance push it over, and it can only be used for those purposes.
Which makes it very transparent to the public.
Very.
Without those added, we really wouldn't be able to provide near the services we're doing today. And we're still hanging on by a thread. As Cindy mentioned, one little dip in the economy, though we don't have much skin in the game, there's still skin there. If we lose 5% of our sales tax, and that's why a lot of times you'll see sales tax, we get a bump. We only do that for one-time purchases as a kind of a safe policy, as opposed to putting it in personnel that you pay for all. So but I can just share with you from my past life, I've always been really proud of Cheney on its ability to provide the services we do for what little bit we get in our taxes. Amen. I'm done.
Thanks.
Good stuff.
Paul, that is good stuff. Yeah.
And you can do it. You can look on your own and see, and I haven't done, like I said, 20 some years, but I was flabbergasted at $309 per capita. That's a pretty good deal. When they say government is wasteful, I come and find the waste in our budget. That's a heck of a deal, actually.
Yeah, I would challenge anybody to find a city that squeezes more blood out of the turnip than Cheney. And it's just a testament to the effort by city staff. I mean, we ask people to do a lot of things, wear a lot of hats. as we've gone through, reorganizations within the various departments and things, it's all based off of the caliber of the people that we have here that can handle, multitasking, doing multiple things. Whereas, you find in City of Spokane, for example, like in the fire department, they have guys that just ride on the back of the truck. Well, Chief would probably love to have that luxury. Oh, we don't. We have to be EMS providers. We have to be fire inspectors. I mean, we have to do a lot of things with a very, very few amount of people.
And with a smile.
And with a smile. And we try our best.
Yeah, if I'm gonna have the big one, I wanna do it in Cheney.
Yeah.
As far as our
I tell that to people all the time.
As long as you're on this side of the tracks.
Yeah.
Or
north of the
police
tracks.
officers, they carry fire extinguishers too.
Yeah.
I mean, they're right there, and I've seen them put out fire with damn fire extinguisher, and our other guys show up and really hose the place down. I mean, you don't get that in a lot of other places.
Well, and I would say too, just the collaboration amongst the departments. Police support fire. I mean, how many times do you have police officers doing CPR? Because they might be the first ones on scene. We might be in a double up situation, so we need all hands on deck. You don't see that everywhere. You don't see a lot of police officers jumping in to provide EMS. And kind of same goes with fire. They'll back up police when they need them. I mean, that's just who we are.
People were shooting, we probably go back about two.
You're like, gotta set a boundary somewhere.
I mean, they win. They put their lives, in harm's way to try to protect our citizens best we can. And that's just another thing that we do. We go above and beyond.
Got a lot written down.
You have a lot written down.
Go for it. This is your
Okay,
opportunity.
thank you. Okay, another question is, okay, when we have vacancies in staff, right? Like we don't have Parks and Rec director, we don't have certain things like that. Where are those funds just absorbed, or do we keep those funds set aside to fill those positions?
Depends what the position is. Let's
Okay.
talk about the Park and Rec Director. That's a separate fund, Park
Okay.
and Recreation Department. So although in 2024, we budgeted for a Parks and Recreation Director, that didn't happen in 2024. That money it just stays in the Parks and Recreation Fund. So it's there to be reallocated for something else they might need, or it's just cash carryover to the next year and can be used at that year. It doesn't go anywhere.
Okay. So then I guess that leads me to a question on fire's budget I saw.
Mhm.
It said, it's like almost like double for admin for fire, but we haven't really added.
Because
Mhm.
there was a little bit of a reorg in the fire department. So they had an admin so that she was gone. And now they have 2 deputy chiefs. Those deputy chiefs are not part of the fire suppression budget where all the firefighters are. So those 2 got moved up with the chief. And so although it was minus an admin, she was a much lower paid than that. And so now it's the chief and the 2 deputies up in the admin for personnel.
Okay. Thank you.
I can say the same thing probably in the police. If you looked at that, the admin and the police budget, the dispatch contract is being paid. We budgeted. We aren't sure what that's going to be exactly. Best guess by Chief Bechtel was about $300,000. That's sitting up in the administration budget before, where it didn't used to be. So that admin budget went up considerably in police, and that's why.
Okay. And then I think the last question I have for now is, we budget overtime.
Yes.
Right? But then overtime goes over
Yes.
often. So I guess I'm curious where we pay for that from and why, how do we circumvent that, like with positions, so we're not paying overtime?
So overtime is a one-time cost where we just talked about, if you hire a position, that's an ongoing cost that's going to have an upward trend because their contracts go up and they cost more year to year. So, but the overtime, if I'm going to talk about police and fire specifically, because that's probably who you're talking about, and those are both in the general fund. So yes, they've both been over the past several years. Where that money has come from savings in other departments in the general fund. If I don't spend all my money, because since I'm part of that big, mixing bowl of departments, any excess unspent money from other funds goes to pay for that in that way. If it wasn't going to work, I do have the mayor's contingency fund. I could knock on his door and say, hey, can I please use this? But so far that has worked. We've always before have budgeted a little more for legal, and our legal expenses in the last few years have been lower than we thought they would be. So we've had some savings there. This budget, you're going to see an increase in the legal because y'all know we have a full-time city attorney now. And so that legal budget shot up as well. Well worth it, I might add, as a user of those legal services. But so I don't have that piece anymore. So it's something I'm monitoring, this budget to actual in the general fund pretty closely because I do that anyway. But just looking at those overtime budgets and seeing how far they go over. If I think that's going to happen, I have things like interest that I have excess revenues. I got more interest than I thought this year. Those are the kinds of things you'll see on our final budget amendment. I might grab some of that interest to fund some of their overtime. So if we have unearned revenue that we received, revenue in excess of what we budgeted, that money is available to fund excess expenditures. If that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Cindy,
I think the rest of
Yes.
the notes are-
I'm not seeing an overtime line on those summaries. Is that called something else? Is that capital or?
No, I didn't specifically itemize the overtime line. There's overtime. Most of the police overtime is in the police patrol budget. In fact, all of it. And the fire is in the fire suppression budget. And it's just part of that whole, I grouped those by function as opposed to specific expense code. Certainly if you would like to see overtime pulled out of that, I will say for the 20 and 24 and 25 budget, they got the same base overtime budget as they've had. The hope is that, we have, well, I don't think they're quite full now anymore because police, they just lost somebody and they're back in background check. But if we can get to where we're actually fully staffed again at both police and fire, I believe that the hope is that's going to help curb that overtime somewhat. Because we've just been so, people are leaving and then you're always having someone in training and you have someone out for leave because they're having a child and you have people then covering for those. And there's all these overtime pieces in place. And if we can get to where we're fully staffed, we can cover those overtime shifts easier internally without probably overtime. That's my understanding. If I am not speaking of that correctly, please say so.
No, I think you are. We talked about that in the public safety meetings and both chiefs showed us what it would look like if they were fully staffed and how the overtime would go down. So yeah, I think that's correct.
But that doesn't happen the second that they get them. There's academies and training and they have to ride along and they're not on their own, so to speak, for some time. But I think we're in the process of trying to get there.
Yeah.
And
And then,
it's going to help.
one other thing real quick. The 4,671,100 on the revenue side, that is the beginning fund balance.
Yes, that's both restricted and unrestricted, though. That's probably all the cash I think is going to come in. And a good chunk of that is restricted.
Okay, what's it restricted for again?
There's a variety of restricted reserve accounts for various departments out there. That includes our 25% reserve, which is the biggest chunk of that. Right now, there's still I think I still have the ARPA money that is unspent in there, although in talking to Todd, that might be swinging over to water before the end of this year. I actually have a slide on that, but I was going to talk more about that at the next council, but I'll be happy to find the slide if you want me to, but I have that identified and isolated out, and I believe it's on the general fund summary. There should be a summary for the general fund, and I think I stuck that on there.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I was just hoping the 25% was in it. So that's great.
It is. Yeah. It's included in that. I just am trying to be really transparent with our money. We didn't used to do that. I used to only budget what we were going to spend. And I just didn't think, and we only started budgeting everything that was coming in and everything we were saving last year because I just felt like it was more transparent for you as a body to see all the money we had and what we had in reserve and what it was for. And because I always had a lot of questions, well, what kind of reserves do we have? And well, gee, that's a good question. And so we started being more transparent with that and giving you that information just so you're aware that we have money. We have $1 million saved for the fire truck. You know, that's part of that 4.6. You know, just things like that so that you know that we have these little pockets of money that are kind of sitting aside, aren't eligible for operations, but we have them for these various purposes.
I have one more question.
Yes,
Sorry.
please.
When do we renegotiate contracts we have with like Eastern? Is that like a year?
Like the fire safety contract, that'd be a Mark question.
Look, when it ends, it's coming up in the next few years, but that's certainly something that we have to take a hard look at.
Is it like a 10-year contract or how does
It's
that?
kind of a rolling, 3 years, something like that, but we can give notice and say, hey, it's time for us.
It has a good riser in it.
Oh, yeah.
It is a bit low, and I think, Chief and I have talked about some strategies, going forward to, present them the information that, you know, we're gonna have to see a boost.
Okay.
Because they should be paying their fair share.
That got ugly.
That's a good question. Great question.
A while then,
Mhm.
where they wouldn't come and negotiate years ago.
Mhm.
We didn't really have,
Yeah, they didn't, this has all happened in really the last decade or so. We didn't have a relationship where they actually paid us much of anything other than a pittance up until we set. I mean, yeah, that's why they didn't want to come sit.
Yeah, they, well, probably back in what, 2000? They kind of took us
What was it?
Alvin.
I was on
Yeah.
council during that.
Uh,
I remember.
It sort of, they sort of renegotiated and went away from a formula, and we lost out on several $100,000 a year. So in what, 14-ish, we went back to the table and tried to sort of right the ship, and got some more funding. We got some dedicated funding for equipment, plus on top of the other contractual amount. And that's been going along okay, but now it's, they have what calls for service and those sorts of things. They're responding to more, alarms and things on campus. I think it's again time to take a hard look at, what percentage should they take play in, overall. So that's something we do in the next couple of years or so.
yeah, we had, before, prior to that, we had to talk to our legislators to get their attention. And then we based it on a per square foot building wise. And we come up with there were other examples to use, but they weren't really willing to, we had to really kind of get tough and get to the president to really get that started. And it's still, there should be some more state assistance on how cities, I mean, cause you look at all their entirety is all tax free. But
I can tell you right now, our relationship with Eastern is significantly better than it was 10 years ago.
I think we have a president who's much more engaged in the
Yes.
community now, and really is, I think, open to working more closely with the city,
Community, yeah.
probably than anyone since Dr. Jordan. So,
Wonder if now is a better time if she's not there. I mean, who knows how long she'll be there.
True.
Capitalize on the amicable relationship.
I just had a quick question. Todd. Come on up. Come on down. One of the things that, we talk about our 25% reserve, just as a what if or a scenario, Todd, if we had and we'll get a little bit of a earthquake now and then, a little shaker. But if we had something significant, let's say where we had one where the aeration basin, how big is that? Is that a couple million gallons?
Yeah.
If that thing blew out. And the thing with owning a wastewater treatment facility, you never get to shut it off. Everyone's just going to keep on flushing no matter what the issue is. So what would we, what happens in that situation? If we blew out the aeration basins, what would we do?
What would we do?
Yeah,
Well, obviously we have
other than panic, I mean,
obviously we built on the very lowest side, so every, stuff runs downhill. So yeah, we'd have to make an emergency reserve to possibly intercept the mains and go into what we have as a lagoon system, and cut that flow and rate that flow. Immediately, you contact the Department of Ecology, and we start a process where we test to make sure we're not going to hit any state bodies of water with where we're at. But what would we do? I don't know. It would be pretty much a scramble to look at any sorts of funding, including insurance, to that end. But yeah, those type of facilities would be fairly impacted for a long, long time just to get it back up and running. My concern is that when you talk about that, I'm more concerned with same scenario on a reservoir. I mean, we have a reservoir, 4 million gallons up on the hill. What happens to that? We have to have contingency plans, and fortunately we pump into the system and not directly into a reservoir, so we can valve and isolate and do certain things. But yeah, there is some things that
I know when it was designed, I think it's where we put those electric panel, the
solar panels,
solar
yeah,
panels.
they're a little bit higher than what we're supposed to be in there. So.
That's somewhat of a basin in that event, but if we ever get raw sewage in any kind of our bodies of water, DOE really, you end up in EPA. You can spend a 25% reserve pretty quickly on a lot of different things for those. How often they happen, I don't know.
Yeah, we just spent, we had a really good price. I mean, when you take a look at the whole history of the wastewater treatment plant compared to today, I'm seeing bills of 70 plus million to build a wastewater treatment plant today, where we started way back in 98, 99. And that full package, including all the ground that we bought, was right around 12 million. We came back in 2009 and built the expansion for 11 million. So the price, total price, including the expansion, is still right around that 24, 25 million, compared to replacing any portion or that whole plant of that nature and that size would be an incredible amount of money.
So what is the amount in the general fund we have at 25%? Is that, that's less than $1 million, isn't it?
0.4.
2.4. Oh, okay.
Water fund has a 25% operating reserve. So there's the general fund, the street fund, parks and recreation, the water fund, the garbage fund, the sewer fund, and the light fund. The sewer fund does not.
The 2.5 includes all of that.
No, it's
Okay.
just the general
Just
fund.
the general.
Everybody has their own. And so what I do is I look at what their operational expenses are for the next year. And I just take the 25% of that and then reserve that piece right there. So it changes a little bit from year to year.
Good conversation for sure. Good questions. And you'll also have another opportunity when the departments present. We'll also ask questions too. So as you're looking through the budget, jot down.
Yeah, I thought Cindy did an excellent job
Yeah,
just kind of
thank you,
laying out the basics. But is there anything else that you don't understand, you have more questions on, you would like more information on? We could give.
I'll have more. I just
Yeah,
don't
no,
right
good.
now. So.
That's the nature. That's the purpose of the budget season, is get all these questions answered. Understand, because we want to have an approved balanced budget by the end of the year. Thank you, Cindy. That was well done.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would give that a AAA plus.
You will.
Move right up that.
3 gold stars and a chocolate.
Yeah.
Well, if there's no more questions, I'd entertain a motion to conclude this meeting.
Woo, let's do it.
Okay, we are concluded.
Smells like.
Danielle, I just gave you that second because I didn't hear one.
Pardon?